This is Tom for Tabletop Tap Room. This is my actual interview of Steve Winter. We had a live stream set up, and life just intervened, and that couldn't be kept. So a couple of people came on and kibitzed with me for that live stream. We were hoping that Steve would maybe show up, and so we then rescheduled for during a day and time when I knew Eric Tenkar was doing a live stream. And I said, I'm not going to compete with Eric for a live stream. So we recorded it. I hope I've done a good enough job with the interview. I really would have loved to have had all your questions in the comments for Steve, because I think, the hive mind would have asked questions I wouldn't have thought necessarily. So here we go with Tabletop Tap Room, and thank you for watching the video. Don't forget that like, subscribe, and bell icon, and enjoy the show. I'm Tom from Tabletop Tap Room, and I have with me here Steve Winter. Interview we had this scheduled, but life interrupted and he couldn't make it. So we're just recording it tonight, because tonight actually is Eric Tenkar's live stream, and there was no way I was going to do a live stream to compete with him. So here we are. Steve, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Now, I was doing some digging into your history at TSR. You were, and I meant to dig in and get AI to look up when you were hired. What year were you hired at TSR?
1981.
1981. And I know that it looked like the credits that you had to your name at TSR in the beginning were strictly like revision and editing credits. But then later on, as things changed, you started to do writing. So is that what you were hired for, is strictly editing?
I was hired as an editor. And right before I came to the company, the what was referred to as R&D, which was the design department, had three divisions. There were designers, developers, and editors. And the editing end of things was much closer to what you would consider to be traditional editing. Mm-hmm. But the development department was wiped out shortly after that. They basically just decided, you know what, we really don't need this, which was not true, but they didn't really need it as a separate department. And right. A lot of that responsibility then fell on the editors. So the editors became developers/editors.
What you say wiped out the department, did they just fire people or move them over to the other?
A lot of the impetus for it. Excuse me, turns out I'm sitting on something. I had thrown a rag on the chair and it was still there. That was right about the time that Paul Ritchie III and Evan Robinson were both fired from the company, and they were the two main names in the development department, or at least they were like 2/3 of it, I think. Mm-hmm. I think that basically that left Kevin Hendricks in the development department, and maybe Mike Price. I don't recall if he was actually a developer or if he sat in a different chair at that time. But once Evan and Paul were fired for what we all referred to as trumped up charges of insubordination, I think that was kind of why they decided, well, maybe we don't need a development department.
So somebody spoke their mind, and higher ups didn't appreciate it. And
pretty much, yeah.
Is that in the same vein as the brouhaha over Palace of the Silver Princess? Because that came with some artwork that supposedly the claim is that it was a little too racy, but then some artwork seemed to be lampooning people at the company.
Well, yeah, that is all true. And and I mean these events were all kind of tied together.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to hear the whole sordid story or not, but yes, the Evan and Paul were fired over comments they had made about the board game that we were doing on Escape from New York.
Oh.
And then Bill Willingham and Jeff D essentially put up a show of support for Paul and Evan, and they were fired as well.
Oh my goodness.
And then this was kind of a separate thing. I think it was over SajCon when S3 when the Gary's SajCon adventure came out, and he was not happy with what development and editing had done to his adventure, and so he issued a memo saying, this is all in this kind of toxic atmosphere that was floating around at the time, that developers and editors can cross the T's and dot the I's, and otherwise they should keep their hands off. And what's the next adventure that comes through the pipeline? Palace of the Silver Princess. And everyone looked at it and we all said, wow, this is really something we should not publish, right? This is filled with problematic material. It wasn't just the art, it was the whole adventure.
Right.
But we have this memo here that says we're not supposed to do anything. So the adventure got published as it was written. And within 24 hours, people up in the executive suite read that adventure and hit the roof and came down to R&D looking for heads to chop off. And, God bless them, our managers pulled out that memo and pointed at it and said, this is 100% the result of this memo. Right? And so no heads rolled over it, but it was a very ugly situation.
Yeah, I've been in a few of those over the years, but of course, because one of my passions, which you probably figured out, is Star Frontiers. I had all of the canon material, including the 2001 and 2010 modules, uploaded to Google Notebook, and I set the II. Says, I want you to find everything Steve Winter's written for Star Frontiers, and it ain't much.
No. No, I worked on the 2 boxed sets, and I did 1 or 2 Dragon articles, and I think that was it.
You Dragon 64 Blast Off, when they were kicking off, I think it released
kind of an introduction. What is Star Frontiers kind of thing?
And then there was Polyhedron 14. Remember Polyhedron?
Yes, that was what was it called? Jitterbugging or something like that?
Ambush on Los End.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, you're right. Somebody else did the jitterbug thing. Yeah.
So I got to get in a few Star Frontiers questions before we actually get to, because you volunteered to come on and talk about Click Clack, right, and have my copy. I'm probably going to twist your arm to let me mail it to you for you to sign it, and I'll put a address stamped envelope in there for you to mail it back. But it's Star Frontiers. The rumor has it that Zeb Cook and Lawrence Schick produced the game, and it was targeted at an older college age crowd. And at the last minute, it was taken away from them and revised by committee. And this is a source of Zeb didn't like that, and he never was involved in Star Frontiers again after that. Do you remember any of that? Is that story true?
Oh yeah. So Zeb and Lawrence wrote a game called Alien Worlds.
Yes,
and that a lot of that grew out of it was a problem within the R&D department, that a morale problem, basically, that no one got royalties on anything except Gary and Dave Arneson.
Ah,
And a lot of the writers felt like, that they should be cut in on royalties on things that they did. And at the time, I totally agreed with them. In hindsight, I kind of feel like, yeah, that probably not, But when you're young and full of juice, you feel like, you deserve things that you maybe don't. But uh, but they made an arrangement with the company that they would write. The company's attitude was, you're writing this material on company time. You're getting a salary, and Gary and Dave wrote D&D on their own time before TSR existed, right? So that's why they're getting royalties. Now that's a pretty thin excuse, but they Lawrence and Dave said, fine, we'll write this science fiction role-playing game on our own time. We will use no company resources for this. And when you publish it, we want a royalty on this. And they wrote a game it was very much I actually play tested, went through a few play testing sessions with them, and it was a good game. It was a fun game, but it was it was hard science fiction, and it was reasonably detailed. It was a more detailed game, for example, than Traveler, which is a pretty fast and loose game, really. Even though it has a reputation for hard science fiction, it deals with a lot of things rather abstractly that Alien Worlds delved into a little more.
mm.
Not to the extent of any of like SPI's Universe, right? Which we also play tested and thought was, unplayable. But then right about the time that Mike Gray was hired at TSR, Mike came in from Hasbro, and I had a very strong background in board games and family games. And he took a look at Alien Worlds, at the manuscript, and in consultation with the executives, I think Mike kind of led the charge that this is the wrong game, right? This is aimed at college level players, and our audience here really needs to be like 12-year-olds. And again, all of this, there's many different sides to these arguments, right? And one of the real problems with doing a game for college age kids is that you're only going to have them for a year or two, right? And then they're going to graduate and get jobs, and they're going to stop buying your game, right? If you sell a game to 12-year-olds, they may play it for 8 years, right? What became Star Frontiers, I wouldn't say it was designed by a committee, but the problem was the game had been promised to distributors at a certain date, and we had to deliver a game on that date, right? So it was an all hands on deck situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
The game, they felt like this game needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, and we have like 6 weeks to do it. I forget what the exact time frame was. 6 weeks might be more than we had. So yeah, it was everybody in design, everybody in editing, although the bulk of the editing, 80% of that weight fell on Troy Denning and me. But I mean, the entire design department, they basically just handed out, it was like, you're going to do the combat system, you're going to do character generation, you're going to do, worlds, you're going to do monsters, right? And if it had been done by a committee, there probably would have been more coordination between all these different people working on it. But it was just sort of parceled out, and then everyone kind of did their own thing, and it fell on Troy and me to sort of make it all work.
Well, that's fascinating. I said designed by committee because I had heard it phrased that way maybe 20 years ago.
That would be a polite way to put it. Yeah.
The euphemistic way to put it.
Yeah.
And
I should say, I had the experience of working on it at the time was so awful. It was not a fun process because the deadline was so tight, and everybody was working at maximum capacity. everybody's nerves were frazzled and on edge. Troy and I were working 14 hours a day, like 5 days or 6 days a week. We were, I don't know how much of a family show this is. We were drinking heavily every evening. We just to try and get our nerves to calm back down again. It was probably the worst 4 to 6 weeks of my life. And I really had no interest in Star Frontiers after that. It took me quite a few years to like come back and give Star Frontiers a really fair appraisal and go, you know what, this actually turned out pretty darn well, given the circumstances of its birth. We did a pretty good job with it. So
pursued life for a little bit and then came back to D&D during the 3.5 era. And I was injured and laid up on the couch, and I just started Googling on the phone, Star Frontiers, my old love, and found out, there's a fan community and fan magazines. And I started writing and just getting involved. Okay,
well,
so
you were no more surprised by all of that than I was. Let me tell you, when I stumbled across like the Star Frontiersmen, I was like, wow, I can't believe there's still an active community like this out there.
All right, well, there's while I have you here on the show, I want to ask about something you may not know the answer. There's a setting mystery I've been trying to solve. Let me do a little share screen here so you can see what I'm going to refer to. And this is the gollywog. And the word gollywog appears in the setting.
Yeah.
You're aware of that?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been dying to unravel this thing because it's a planet with a monarchy. They have the Royal Marines. It's very British feel, like no weapons allowed. I lived in England. The common populace doesn't have firearms per se. And so it felt like it was built on, and the inclusion of this word gollywog, I have a theory and my theory is that they included it as a little tip-off because the citizens of Clarion is the name of the planet it's fighting words when you use the word gollywog to refer to them. And I just kind of thought maybe it was a tip-off that they intended the monarch to be black.
It was a very unfortunate mistake is what it amounts to. I forget who exactly it was who wrote that portion of it. But because we did not know, you got to remember, this was a bunch of Midwestern white boys working on these games.
Yeah.
And we had never heard that term used as a pejorative. I had never heard it before at all. And it was only after the thing was in print that one of the people at TSR who had grown up in the South, who came and said, "Are you aware that this is kind of an offensive term?"
Yeah.
Right? And we were horrified, right? And it was something that shouldn't have happened. But and again, a lot of it boils down to the way this was all done at absolute top speed, right? With almost no time for review.
Right.
So, I wish that word wasn't in there. As I say, I don't remember who it was that wrote that portion of it, but when we talked about it afterward, they were just like, yeah, I mean, I'd heard the word. I just thought it was kind of a funny word. I didn't know that it was offensive. I didn't know it was.
Well, they did insert it as an insult, so they must have had some idea that it was insulting. But I remember scratching my head in the late 2000s.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people did.
Trying to figure it out, going, why? So, all right. Unfortunate accident that it slipped in. it's a Palace of the Silver Princess kind of thing.
Well, unfortunately, it's really not. I mean, this one is a lot less defensible than Palace of the Silver Princess, which somebody should have known. Someone should have caught it. We just didn't.
Well, we'll get that off the screen.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was all right. So, after I don't know 15, 20 years of scratching my head on this, I'm like, all right, now I'm glad I finally know, that it was just unfortunate and they wished it hadn't been in there.
It was, yeah.
So
like youthful foolishness, but that's probably treating it too lightly.
Yeah, and I don't know what to do with it now. Because one of my as an editor on all of the fan magazines, one of the things that I did was because there's some parts, some things like Zebulon's Guide, not very popular with certain fans. One of the stances I always took is I tried to use everything as a baseline and try to incorporate and use everything. And I know a lot of fans, when they have played the game, they've actually played a character from Clarion and then role played getting angry when they were called a gollywog, and so it's the kind of thing I feel like we should write it out, maybe pick a new a new word to be the insult, but it's almost like it's so entrenched.
Yeah. I mean, I have done role-playing sessions where we did not dance around racism, right? Where racism was actually an important factor in what was going on in the adventure. These were like sort of pulp noir games, set in the South in the 1930s.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And it's like, this is a fact of life. And, some of the characters of the player characters were non-white characters, and they had to deal with some of those things. Right. But I mean, that's something that people need to talk about before you sit down to play the game, right? And you need players who are mature and who are interested in using that as, interested in using role playing to kind of explore some of that. That was not the intention in what happened with Star Frontiers at all. That, as I said, that was just a mistake. But now I kind of forget where I was going with this. I'll leave it at that. And if you have any further questions, we can delve into it more. I'm not at all averse to talking about it. I think role playing is actually a really good venue for delving into some of these kinds of things.
Yeah.
As long as everybody at the table is on board with that.
Yeah, I've used role playing to work through some issues once or twice. I got kicked out of seminary, and so afterwards, I just felt like I had to play a Yazarian priest who'd been kicked out of the priesthood. So I did that a few times. But yeah, now I think this is. I want to backtrack a little bit from Star Frontiers before we get into Click Clack. And one of the things I noticed about your career at TSR was that I saw that you worked on D&D, AD&D 1 and 2. You obviously wrote a couple of articles for Star Frontiers, did some editing, Gamma World, Boot Hill, Marvel Superheroes. You have the gamut of RPG genres in your credits, and I was just curious, what was your favorite genre or your favorite setting that you loved at the time, or now is maybe now more in hindsight, I really like this?
I mean, I always really loved working on the AD&D material. That was and Marvel had a great time working on the Marvel superheroes game with Jeff Grubb. That was uh, that was a it was a bad time at the company, but it was a great project to be working on, and we really I think we both really enjoyed that particular process. And that's another game that I hadn't played for decades, and it's only since going back to some of the old school conventions that I've gotten a chance to sit down and play Marvel superheroes again. Um, and man, I just think that is a really fun game to play. That really turned out well and holds up extremely well uh, in light of developments in role playing games over the last 30 years.
Sure. Yeah.
You know,
So, you were at TSR at the transition, the infamous transition from Gary to Lorraine Williams,
Mhm.
and Eric Tenkar recently did a video, Gary versus Gaygax versus Williams, and it had a more nuanced approach to what went down. And I was, and in the Star Frontiers community, Lorraine Williams is not well liked. There's a pejorative some people like to apply to her name. I'm not going to repeat it here, but I don't think that most people in life are not all bad. And I know she's been kind of portrayed that way. Is there anything you could tell us about Lorraine Williams that might be like, oh, geez, maybe she wasn't all bad?
Well, I mean, the number one is that when she came into the company, whatever that was, 1983, 82, somewhere around there. I mean, the company really was genuinely foundering, and if without Gary and the Blooms were effectively managing the company out of business. Right? Not out of any kind of malice or anything, but none of them were business people, right?
Right.
They just didn't. It was so big, right? When it was a small company, they were fine, right? They did a great job making it into a really big company. But once it became a really big company, it just I don't think any of them really knew what to do with it or how to manage it. There was a lot of talk at the time. It was always a topic whenever the subject came around to how the business was doing. Just the idea that TSR was a one-trick pony. It had AD&D, and that was our only product that really was keeping the company alive. There were other RPGs, there was Gangbusters, things like that, Boot Hill, right? But none of them, those were rounding errors on what AD&D was doing. So there was this constant fear this constant push that we've got to diversify. We've got to get more legs on this table, because if AD&D collapses, that's it. The company's gone, right? And so there were all kinds of very, very badly thought out attempts to diversify the company, which, we all like to think that, well, I don't know anything about business, but I knew that was a bad idea, right? And I guess maybe it looked like a better idea from the people at the top than it did from the people at the bottom. But none of it panned out, and the company was in really serious financial trouble at that time. And Lorraine came in and took over the company, and from everything I know, everything we heard at the time, and everything I've encountered since, that there was some dirty dealing that went on to make that happen. But the fact is, if it hadn't happened, I think TSR would have been no more, and who knows what would have become of D&D. The trademark and copyrights would have been sold off to somebody. I don't know who could have afforded them. They probably would have gone to or just had gone to Western Publishing or somebody like who the company owed a lot of money to.
Mm.
So that's point number one. I think it cannot be denied that however it came about, Lorraine was instrumental in keeping TSR going as a functioning company. And she managed it through several years of really terrible finances, right? There was a time when we were all on deferred salary, right? I think the rank and file we were making, we had like 20 or 25% of our salary deferred, and the executives were on more like 40% deferred salary. And I forget how long that went on. It was less than a year. And once the company was back on a solid footing, that money was paid back to us. Essentially, we were all making an interest-free loan to the company.
Mm.
And then there were all the layoffs because the company had grown to this enormous size before the changeover. There were close to 300 employees, I think, at the time Lorraine took it over, and that was just too many, right? And I think the layoffs in a lot of cases were handled really, really badly, but they kind of had to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah. And the other thing that gets said about Lorraine that really goes strongly to her credit is that I think she really cared about the employees, right? She went above and beyond to see that employees were taken care of and respected. When people had family emergencies, had health emergencies, I don't recall anyone ever being told, no, you cannot take time off to take care of a sick spouse, right?
Yeah.
Or you've got a child that needs extra attention. Take the time, right? That's more important than what we're doing here.
I had heard some of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And when the company finally was sold to Wizards of the Coast, I mean, anybody else managing a company, anybody who came out of an Ivy League business school, facing that situation would have chopped the manpower, chopped the head count way down to try and save money. And Lorraine's attitude was, no, we try to keep everybody working, as many people working as we possibly can, as long as we can. And when she sold the company, one of her conditions was, I want everyone Wizards can possibly extend a job to be given that offer, right? Says you're not going to just buy the properties and move all of this to Seattle and hire a whole new crew, right? These people deserve to go with it, right? So yeah, she really took good care of the employees.
And in light of all of the round upon round of layoffs at Hasbro and WotC that we hear about now, that's kind of admirable on her part.
Yeah. TSR never had, the annual layoff kind of situation. There was a lot of, flip-flopping and floundering around on company policy, but, it was the only time people were laid off other than, Evan and Paul and Jeff and Bill, just like a week before I was hired. For the most part, the only time people were laid off was when it was just absolutely financially necessary to reduce payroll in order to keep the company functioning.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. So this interview actually came about because I reached out to you and asked you about your module, Click, which I always felt like it was unofficial Star Frontiers content because of that word click. And so I asked you, and
yeah, I don't recall that being part of Star Frontiers, but I could easily be wrong. That was decades ago. So
well, there's a species in the Star Frontier setting. They have no stats. They don't actually appear. There's no artwork for them. They're just referenced in the Sundown on Star Mist module.
okay.
As a Klick military scout ship abandoned. It was having some trouble, and it abandoned their client race, the Heliopes, on Star Mist, and they dumped off excess equipment, i.e. the big hover tank that's in that module.
Yeah.
And so we got this word click, and let me do the share screen again. Because I was trying to see if there was a correlation between how they were spelled and there we go. So it's actually spelled two different ways in the same module. AI pulled out the two different spellings for me, and so it's the first time it's used. It's the long version with a C in it, and they shortened it and dropped the C out of the middle. And so, the word around the forums, the Star Frontiers forums in the early 2000s was, oh yeah, you click clack. So of course I bought it. Being a completist, I got to have everything Star Frontiers. And, they are a bug alien, which is how they're described in Sundown on Star Mist. But you said you had no idea so how did it come about that you used this word click?
Well, I used the word because I wasn't working at Wizards of the Coast at the time. I was a freelancer, and they came to me and asked that, I knew all those people because we had, most of us had worked together. But they knew I really enjoyed science fiction. And so they came to me and asked me to write this adventure, but the aliens were essentially just handed to me, right? They said, these are the aliens. This is what they're called. This is what we know about them. There you go. Write the adventure. So yeah, I didn't name them. I didn't design them. I just used what I was handed. But it's entirely possible that whoever came up with these aliens for Alternity was a Star Frontiers fan. I don't know who it was. If it was, it might have been Rich Baker. It might have been Bill Slavisek. I honestly don't know.
Well, technically, they own the word Clicks. It's part of the IP, right?
Yeah. And plenty of those people were, big TSR fans before they came to work at TSR, and then wound up at Wizards of the Coast. So as a hypothesis, it's perfectly plausible. But unfortunately, I can't say one way or the other whether there's anything to it. But I certainly can't rule it out.
Well, I appreciate that. That you're saying, I don't know. I can't say 100% plausible. Yes. Now, looking at this cover, this character reminds me of somebody, and I'm wondering if you'd confirm that she was inspired by Kerrigan in StarCraft. And the reason being is because she's got all these spines here, and you got these little wings put on her back. But I was looking at that thinking, well, that reminds me of Sarah Louise and that game came out, StarCraft came out the year before this module was published. So was there?
And may well be. But one of the things I will say is that, and this was something that when I was a project manager, I always pushed this rather strongly. So anyone I mentored into that position would have been leaning toward it, is the idea that we should give our artists as much creative leeway as we can. Because I know in my case, anytime the more I tried to dictate what they drew, the less happy I would be with the result. And the more free, the creative freedom I gave them, that, the cooler whatever they came up with would be, right? Because their visual imagination was way better than mine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's entirely, and I forget, that I recognize the author and I should be able to dredge up his name, but I can't now. So it's entirely possible that he was given a very vague art suggestion for that. And, he was just pulling in whatever he had seen recently that he thought was really cool. He just worked it into that image.
So design, cover illustration, RK Post.
Yes. Yep. Randy Post.
So, all right. Well, that would be a question to ask him then, I guess.
Yeah. If you can get, I have no idea what he's doing these days, but
the resemblance is there. I'm like, I feel like there's an inspiration there. So, what really fascinated me about this module was that, and the way I've described it to others is it's the Colonial Marines from Aliens meets Star Frontiers. In fact, I was thinking about the Aliens movie the other day, and there's this scene where this character Hicks goes, "Not another bug hunt," and I'm thinking, yes, this is the bug hunt before the Aliens movie.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I mean, because I was a huge fan of both Alien and Aliens.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even did for SPI, I did a board game called Bug Hunters. Right?
Oh, yes.
That was clearly that was, but and there's another influence on that adventure that you may not be aware of.
Okay.
And that is, there was a game, if you remember, SPI did a spin-off magazine from S&T called Ares magazine.
Yeah.
Which eventually TSR came to own. And but before TSR was involved, there was a game in Ares called Damocles Mission. And it was a kind of rendezvous with Rama sort of thing, where this unknown object enters the solar system, and it's some sort of spacecraft. And in the game, it's a solitaire game. You take a crew of astronauts and specialists out to this thing, and you explore it chamber by chamber. And the chambers are basically kind of randomly generated. And what I love that game, and when I did Click, I was trying to recreate some of that, where you're going chamber by chamber through this alien structure and trying to figure out how it works. Now, in Damocles Mission, there aren't enemies, horrific alien monsters in there that are going to rip you to pieces if they find you. So stealth is not as big a thing. But the idea of passages between chambers that open and close beyond your control, things like that. A lot of that comes from Damocles Mission.
Yeah, I know what I'm going to be doing later tonight. I'm going to be going into my archive of Ares magazines.
If you haven't played Damocles Mission, I strongly recommend it. In fact, there was a while at TSR, I had in my office, I had a standing desk, a long standing desk, like 10 feet long. And I had my normal desk, I had this standing desk, and under the standing desk was another layer of shelves. And for quite a while, I just had a copy of Damocles Mission sitting in there on one of those shelves. And, when I had 10 minutes, if I was taking a 10-minute break, when I needed to get my mind off of whatever I was working on, I would sit there and play Damocles Mission for 10 minutes, explore another chamber, and then go back to work.
Yeah, one of the magazine games that I was very fond of was Elephant Hunt. It was a Tom Wham.
Oh, yeah, that was Tom Wham game. Yeah. I loved that game.
Yeah,
I have a copy of that down in the basement somewhere.
Yeah, there was a character in there called Wong Wei, and it was just awesome.
Tom, yeah, and Tom, and I mean, I haven't talked to Tom for decades, but at the time I knew him, and now talking to people who see Tom regularly, they say this hasn't changed at all. He had in his house, he had like a whole shelf full of these just generic brown boxes, right? In fact, I think he got most of them from Jim Ward, who got them from TSR and then gave them to Tom. They were just little cardboard boxes that you could fold up, and they had a lid on them. And we would store paper. When a project was done, all the paperwork went in one of these boxes. You wrote the name on it, and it got put on the shelf as an archive. And Tom just had dozens upon dozens of these boxes on a shelf, and each one of them had a game he had designed in it. Goodness. Right? And they were games that half of them no one but Tom had ever played or ever seen, right? And there were just God knows how many absolute gems of little board games tucked away there in Tom's office.
Wow. That is cool. That is really cool. Oh my goodness. So one of the things I noticed about this module was that it's very much you go in for resource management, water being something you got to manage. There's a ticking clock because of this bio weakness field that happens when you get close to the aliens. And then I was kind of been geeking out past few years here over this game called Mothership that's been coming out.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I know Mothership.
And I was like, yeah, wow, this is like the first game to really do sci-fi horror well. And but no, you had horror and resolve roles for the character, and so you worked that right in very elegantly right into this whole mission. And and I loved, it seems like you don't see resource management as a major feature in more modern RPG adventures anymore. But that's Star Frontier's obviously very resource. So it was very close to my heart when I read it. I was like, "Wow, I like this. I like the ticking clock that it gets worked in there."
Right. I mean, I wanted it to be a little bit like a dungeon crawl, but I wanted the question of when do we turn around and try to get out again, right? Because the characters are there it's not a commando raid, it's a fact-finding mission. And if they don't get out alive with what they've learned, then that's a failure. Well, it's a failure if they don't get out alive, period, I guess. But, but the question of just getting back out again is not a given, right? And if you stay too long and you run out of potable water and food and everything else, that it's a crucial decision to a very operational decision of we cannot. Everybody always wants to go for one more room. Let's see what's through the next door, right? But the enemy is cutting off your escape behind you, and you can't overstay.
Yeah, this is the map of the asteroid, and all these numbers and letters, because these are correspond to cards in a playing card deck. And this is a very alien environment because all of these are different rooms, and the rooms function kind of analogous to organs in the body, and you have arterials between them, random number that come and go, that can completely disappear and be cut off. And they won't disappear and close down with a character in them, but they can shrink right down to nothing. And those function like arteries and nerves, nervous system.
Right.
This is really, not just that. That's a great concept, because this is a dungeon crawl in space. This is like a mega dungeon crawl in space, which you don't get much. And so I'm like, wow, I love it for that reason. But just the environment, you had the smell within there. I think it was described as a combination of meat and urine and rotting and just, so it was oppressive. The oxygen, it's higher pressure and higher oxygen. So exertions cause you to hyperventilate, and that could cause a problem for the player characters. The temperature is highly humid, but lower gravity. So it's a completely alien environment that is oppressive, and you better respect as a player, or it's going to chew you up.
Yeah, I had a very. I was really pleased after I turned over the manuscript, and I forget, someone at Wizards told me when we were chatting later that they had play tested the adventure I gave them, and that like multiple of the play testers, their reaction to playing it was just like, oh my God, this is horrifying. This is so grotesque. And I was like, well, yeah, job accomplished.
So, very much the Ravenloft in space.
Yeah.
But this is really. I collect adventures because I steal ideas from everywhere. I collect from Traveler, Cepheus, Cepheus Engine Rules, which is Traveler, White Star, and Mothership, anything. And I've not seen a really effective dungeon crawl like this. So it's and I have yet to play it because I keep like wanting to play other things with, if I get a Star Frontiers game going, I'm like, it's back burner. But yeah, this is a dungeon crawl.
Yeah. Well, and Alternity, I don't know, the game didn't have a really long lifetime, but it was fun working on this because there was a mechanism in the rules in Alternity where when you made skill rolls and things, that there were, much like Marvel Superheroes, there were levels of success to those checks. So, as I was describing the various chambers in the asteroid, it was, and people were using different kinds of skills to explore them and try and learn what they did. I could make great use of those skill levels, right? It's like, all right, if you get this kind of result, you learn this. But if you get a better result, you learn this, right? And if you get the top result, now you get like really actionable information, right? And so it allowed for a lot of nuance in, for the GM, right, to describe what's going on, because you've got it's not unlike D&D where everything is binary, right? Either it works or it doesn't work. Alternity had those graduated levels of success, and I thought that worked extremely well, at least for an adventure like this.
Yeah, and I've been a critic of the Zebulon's Guide phase shift mechanic that was also used in Marvel Superheroes, I believe.
Yeah. Marvel really kind of set off that wave of action games.
I didn't like it. I liked the simplicity of looking at my character sheet and going, 1/2 my ability score, 10% per level. It's quick math. There's my target number. I roll the percentage dice and done. So I never fully transferred over to Zebulon's Guide, but I can see that you really need that level of success. That, all right, you failed the skill roll, but you're within 20 of the target number, so this is what you learn. Certainly is something that probably will see the light of day at my table at some point here.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people do it informally with D20 games where You needed a 12 to succeed. Oh, you got an 18. All right, well, that works really well. Right? That it's all very uh, mushy, right? It's nice to have those things, and I'm not saying that it's a bad way to play. I've done it myself many, many times, but
Yeah.
it's
So
nice to have things laid out a little more dogmatically sometimes.
yeah. Well, yeah, and again, it gets into that whole old school rulings, not rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you rolled an 18. All right, this is my ruling. This is what you get.
Yep.
And and I just wanted to my last thing to gush about this. Well, there's two more things I could say about this module. This is not even the adventure, but they incorporated this ship deck plan for a Klicks ship in there. Mm-hmm. And again, this is a living organism type thing, and I just thought this was absolutely fabulous. Just great that they included that. And where did you get the idea for weapons growing on a vine? You pick it off the vine and
that was just my imagination. I just thought, that's one of those things when you're writing and it's like, what if I do this? So yeah, I just thought that would be really cool.
And so the Klicks, maybe you can clear this up for me, because I was actually going to get AI to explain it to me, because I dump all these documents into an encapsulated AI, so it's not using everything off the internet, just what I give it. And I was going to have it explain the black lasers. What are a black laser?
I don't know. I don't recall that at all. You're gonna have to give me some context.
Yeah, the Klicks use black lasers, and I was like, okay, note to self, find out what that is at some point.
I suspect it was just something that somebody thought, "Oh, this is a cool term," right? It's one of those. I wonder. I kind of feel, and I could be wrong about this, but I kind of feel like that may have been something I was handed, right? That it may have been part of the background, and I was told, this is something you should work into the adventure, because it's always been kind of one of my pet peeves that in any science fiction where anyone talks about dodging a laser, right? Because it's like, yeah, you cannot see a laser coming at you until it's there, right? Light does not precede a laser. The laser is the light.
Right.
I guess the idea of a black laser is that it's a laser you can't see, but what's the point, since you can't see a laser coming at you anyway? By the time you see it, it's either missed you or hit you.
Yeah. Well, I'll have the AI pull out the exact wording in the module.
Yeah. Now you've got me really curious. I want to go dig out one of my copies of Click and look at that. No,
I just love this module. Loved that it was potentially a further development of the Klicks. It certainly works for me, because they were a bug type alien, kind of mysterious in the Star Frontier setting. And and this is easily portable over to Star Frontiers, without a problem at all.
Yeah.
So I wanted to wrap up all of the interviews I've done. I like to try to wrap them up with advice for aspiring game designers, advice for your writing adventures. I'm currently writing one for to submit as a writing contest at a convention.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's your advice to those of us, and it's maybe some of us are not even semi-professional. As the editor of the fan magazine, I guess I'm more semi-professional than some, but maybe even just for the average Joe Blow, what's your best advice for writing adventures? And
there has never been a better time to be an amateur RPG writer, right? Because between desktop publishing tools and PDF publishing and sites like DriveThruRPG and itch.io, um, in the 1980s, if you wanted to write games and get into publishing, you either had to find a publisher who was interested in what you wrote, and so they would publish it, or publish it yourself, which in a lot of cases, I mean, it was a tough road at that time because there were no desktop publishing tools, right? If you didn't have the ability to do typesetting and all that kind of thing, you couldn't do it yourself. And so now the advice I would give people is, if you want to publish games, just publish games, right? The tools are all right there. Right? Especially RPGs, but even in board games, I mean, there are tons of print and play board games out there. Honestly, and I've spent so much money on gaming PDFs and print and play games, right? I'm addicted to these things. There's hardly a week goes by I'm not buying another PDF of a cool sounding RPG or an adventure or whatever it might be. I have thousands of these things on my computer, and I've read a lot of them, right? And let's face it, a lot of it is rubbish, but there are real gems mixed in there with it, right? There are some super talented people out there doing these kinds of things. And, if you've got an idea, I genuinely believe, I always have believed that the very best role-playing games and board games and adventures have all been labors of love, right? I worked on tons of RPG products that were just assignments, right? It was like, this is what we need, do it, right? And they were good. They were perfectly workmanlike, right? People could play them and have a lot of fun with them. But the ones that really shine are the ones that the people creating it were doing it because they had an idea they loved. And if you've got one of those ideas, make it real. The worst that can happen is you put some effort into it, you put it on drive-through or someplace, and nobody buys it, right? Nobody downloads it. And part of the issue now is that there's so much of it, it's super easy to just get lost in the noise, right?
Yeah.
To just disappear into the background. The cosmic background radiation, that there is so much role-playing stuff out there now.
That was true even before AI.
Yeah.
People started using AI, and now you get
Yeah. I have a story about that. I bought a thing on drive-through. This is probably a year ago, and I'm not going to name what it was, but essentially it was a whole bunch of adventure ideas, adventure seeds for a science fiction game, right? And I bought, and it was cheap. I don't know, it was $1, $2. But I bought it, and reading through it, I thought, wow, this really reads like this was just generated by a chatbot, right? I mean, this could have just been called the Big Book of Science Fiction Cliches, because there was not a creative idea anywhere in there. And just out of curiosity, I pulled up whatever the current chatbot hotness was and asked it, give me 12 ideas for a science fiction role-playing adventure seed. And frankly, every one of them that it spit out was better than what was in that book. And I looked at it and I thought, this book came out a year ago, and that could easily be explained just as the improvement in large language models in the intervening year. Right? Yeah. But yes, you do have to really be careful, because there is a lot of AI slop filtering its way into a lot of that role-playing stuff. Yeah. And I'm very glad that like drive-through has instituted their and you need to make an AI statement for your product about, was AI used in any way in making this?
Yeah.
I think that is a very good
and I'm glad for that, because I in producing the magazines, I on a fan license, I can't make profit, so I can't pay for art.
right.
And I was effectively a beggar. But we had great artists who were Star Frontiers fans, and some of these guys I know are really concerned about AI art unethically scraping their artwork into their training data, and and they're not happy with that. So I took a stand as an editor that we're not doing AI art, we're not having AI writing. One or two pieces of AI art slipped through in the early days, and I just said we're going to call that a mulligan, but no more until the issues are settled. For artists, that some of those court cases.
I mean, I played around with the technology when it was first coming out, and everybody was really excited about it, and I do think it's a powerful tool. A lot can be done with it, but ultimately, I cannot get past the idea that the whole thing is built on plagiarism, and I made my living via copyright laws, right? Yeah. My work would have been valueless without copyright, and it's at some time in the hopefully very soon, that is a problem that's got to be addressed by legislation of some kind.
Well, the thing that settled it for me was that AI music was very careful to only incorporate that which is public domain. Mm-hmm. Nothing copyrighted. And whereas for AI art, they just incorporate everything. They don't care if you own it. And I just looked at that and said, they're afraid of being sued by Sony. Remember the file sharing lawsuits? So starving artists.
There's a small number of very powerful corporations that own most of that music. But art, art isn't owned by a handful of very powerful corporations. It's owned by a bunch of powerless creators. So we can steal that,
Yeah, because what are we going to do? Sue them? I don't have the money for it, right? So I have done my best to support the artists that supported Tom Stevens and I for years with the magazines, and but you're right. It is a powerful. It's here to stay.
Mm-hmm. I'll confess, I have used AI generated illustrations privately, right?
Yes.
To create an illustration for a role-playing game session, things like that, things where it's never going to be published. There was, no money was ever going to change hands, no matter what, right? I think you can almost build a guilt-free case for doing that sort of thing with it, but anything beyond that, I find it becomes very ethically problematical.
Yeah. No. Well. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. It's too bad we had to record it because of the chat. People would have had questions.
Yeah.
There was just no way we were going to compete with Eric Tenkar's live stream tonight.
Yeah, who's on his live stream?
I think it's Bad Mike from North Texas.
Oh, okay.
I think and somebody else. And isn't Gen Con happening? Gen Con's kicking off. So I think Mike.
No, it's still July. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's actually happening.
Gary Con. There was some convention.
Yeah, it could be Gary Con. There was
some convention that Jim Kitchen's going to go to, and so I don't think he's on there tonight.
All right.
But I know better than.
And I apologize for the mess up over the last one.
Eric's got like 3K, 5K subs. I'm not competing. But again, thank you. And I really appreciated this. You cleared up a few things for me, which the whole gollywog issue I'm relieved about. I feel for certain that the click mystery I'm probably right on.
I hope, you know what? I hope you are, because I like those kinds of Easter eggs in RPG things, right? I think it's a neat little bit of continuity for the people who know the history to recognize those things.
Yeah, it just feels like it's a little too coincidental to be not a coincidence. So this is Tom for Tabletop Tap Room, and my guest was Steve Winter, a TSR legend. Can I call you that?
You can call me that. That doesn't necessarily make it true,
but and I really enjoyed the insights on TSR that you brought to the interview, and again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.